Okay, so imagine you wake up. It's 4 a.m. The city of London is still dark, still quiet, and you are already behind because the rats, they don't wait. Your name doesn't really matter. Nobody's going to remember it. You are, at the bottom of the social ladder, a rat catcher. And I don't mean that in a fun, quirky Victorian tradesman kind of way. I mean you are one rung above the guy who scoops up horse manure off the street. And honestly, some days you'd trade jobs. You grab your tools, a few wire traps, a terrier that smells terrible and has one eye, and a cage full of ferrets you've named but shouldn't have, because ferrets in this job don't exactly retire peacefully. And then you head into the sewers. Now, hold on, because people always picture this wrong. They imagine some cobblestone alley, maybe a few rats scurrying past, and you swooping in heroically with a net. No, Victorian London sewers in the early to mid 1800s, before Bazalgette's Great Sewer Project, were basically open rivers of human waste running under the city. The smell was so bad that in 1858, Parliament had to close its windows and hang curtains soaked in chloride of lime because the Thames itself, the river the whole city drank from, smelled like a mass grave. They called it the Great Stink. You are working inside that every day for pennies. And here's where it gets worse. The rats down there aren't the scrawny little things you see darting across a subway platform today. Victorian London's brown rats, the dominant species by then, having basically massacred the black rat population to take over, were fat, aggressive, and numerous in a way that is genuinely hard to picture. Estimates in the mid 1800s suggested London had roughly one rat per person. The population was around 3 million. You do that math. So you're down in the dark, in the filth, with a lantern that gives you about 2 feet of visibility, and you are catching these things by hand. By hand. Because traps and ferrets would only get you so far. The real money, and we'll get to the money situation because it is genuinely grim, came from catching them alive. Alive rats fetched more. And why did they fetch more? Because of rat baiting. Rat baiting was exactly what it sounds like. You'd fill a pit, sometimes a purpose-built arena in a pub basement, sometimes just a barrel, with as many live rats as possible. Then you drop a dog in and bet on how fast it could kill them all. This was legal entertainment. Families went. There were champions. A bull terrier named Billy reportedly killed 100 rats in under 6 minutes in 1822 and was treated like an athlete. And you, the rat catcher, were the supplier, which means you needed volume. You needed dozens of live rats per trip, which meant you were grabbing them bare-handed from dark holes in walls and drain pipes while they were actively trying to bite you, which they did constantly. Now, a rat bite in 2025 is annoying. You go to urgent care, you get antibiotics, you go home. A rat bite in 1840s London, that's potentially rat bite fever. That's leptospirosis. The bacteria living in Victorian sewer rats were not messing around, and the medical infrastructure available to a man in your income bracket was basically nothing. You wrapped it in a rag, you kept working, and you hoped. The famous rat catcher Jack Black, who actually held the title of Rat and Mole Destroyer to Queen Victoria, which sounds made up but isn't, described being bitten so many times that he developed what he believed was immunity. He'd show off his scarred hands like they were trophies, and honestly, that scarring was the proof of the job in a way nothing else was. Your hands told the whole story. But here's the part that doesn't come up when people romanticize his era. The economics of it were designed to keep you exactly where you were. A decent rat catcher might earn a few shillings per job, maybe more if the infestation was bad and the client was a large business, a warehouse, a brewery, a bakery. Bakeries were good work because the rats there were endless, and the owner had actual financial incentive to deal with them. But residential work? Ordinary Londoners didn't pay you. They'd offer you the dead rats as payment and expect you to make your money selling the bodies. Rat fur had some minor value. Rat fat was used in cheap tallow. And of course, live ones went to the pits. So your income depended on a secondary market for rat corpses. Let that sink in. And even that market was unstable. When rat baiting started falling out of fashion, And it did slowly. As animal welfare movements gained ground toward the 1850s and 60s, the demand for live rats dropped, which meant your income dropped, and you had no union, no recourse, no fallback. You just caught more rats for less money until something changed, which it usually didn't. Now, some rat catchers didn't just sell rats, they bred them. Once rat baiting created a market for volume, certain catchers realized they could supplement their wild catches by keeping colonies of rats and farming them in their homes. These weren't like separate structures, these were the same rooms their families slept in. Documented accounts from the era describe rat catchers keeping hundreds of animals in cages, stacked floor to ceiling in single room dwellings, feeding them scraps, letting them multiply, and selling the offspring to the pits. The smell alone, I can't even. And there's a weird twist here that almost nobody talks about. Those breeding programs, they accidentally gave birth to the fancy rat. The domestic rat you can buy in a pet shop today with the little spotted coat and the friendly temperament, that came from Victorian rat catchers selectively keeping the calmer, oddly colored ones. Because people, including Queen Victoria herself apparently, started keeping them as pets. But back to the sewers, because that's where your day actually lives. The shift could run 10, 12 hours. You'd move through the city hitting different clients. The docks were lucrative but dangerous because the rats around the Thames wharves were enormous and territorial in a way that felt almost personal. Grain warehouses along the river had infestations so severe that the rats had worn visible paths in the wooden floors from generations of the same routes. You could follow their highways. You'd set your traps along those lines, let the ferret do its work to flush them out, and then go in. By the end of a full day, you might have 50, 60 rats. Your clothes were saturated in a combination of sewer water, rat urine, and whatever was actively decomposing in the walls. You couldn't really get that smell out. It lived in the fabric. It lived in your skin. And because you were a rat catcher, people on the street knew what you were before you opened your mouth. There was a social radius people kept around you. You'd notice it. And then you'd go home, maybe a single room in a rookery in St. Giles or Whitechapel, where 6 or 7 people shared a space barely big enough for 2, count your shillings, eat whatever you could afford, and sleep for a few hours before doing it again. That's the deal. That's what you signed up for. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you want more of this.